Hello. Tonight, we begin with the most fascinating fairy tales. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Elf of the Rose. In the midst of a garden grew a rose tree in full blossom, and in the prettiest of all the roses lived an elf. He was such a little wee thing that no human eye could see him. Behind each leaf of the rose, he had a sleeping chamber. He was as well formed and as beautiful as a little child could be, and had wings that reached from his shoulders to his feet. Oh, what sweet fragrance there was in his chambers, and how clean and beautiful were the walls, for they were the blushing leaves of the rose. During the whole day, he enjoyed himself in the warm sunshine, flew from flower to flower, and danced on the wings of the flying butterflies. Then he took it into his head to measure how many steps he would have to go through the roads and crossroads that are on the leaf of a linden tree, what we call the veins on a leaf. He took for roads. Aye, and very long roads they were for him. For before he had half finished his task, the sun went down. He had commenced his work too late. It became very cold, the dew fell, and the wind blew. So he thought the best thing he could do would be to return home. He hurried himself as much as he could, but he found the roses all closed up, and he could not get in. Not a single rose stood open. The poor little elf was very much frightened. He had never before been out at night, but had always slumbered secretly behind the warm rose leaves. Oh, this would certainly be his death. At the other end of the garden, he knew there was an arbor overgrown with beautiful honeysuckles. The blossoms looked like large painted horns, and he thought to himself he would go and sleep in one of these till the morning. He flew thither, but hush, two people were in the arbor, a handsome young man and a beautiful lady. They sat side by side and wished that they might never be obliged to part. They loved each other much more than the best child can love its father and mother. "But we must part," said the young man. "Your brother does not like our engagement, and therefore he sends me so far away on business, over mountains and seas. Farewell, my sweet bride, for so you are to me." And then they kissed each other, and the girl wept and gave him a rose. But before she did so, she pressed a kiss upon it so fervently that the flower opened. Then the little elf flew in and leaned his head on the delicate, fragrant walls. Here he could plainly hear them say, "Farewell, farewell," and he felt that the rose had been placed on the young man's breast. Oh, how his heart did beat. The little elf could not go to sleep. It thumped so loudly. The young man took it out as he walked through the dark wood alone, and kissed the flower so often and so violently that the little elf was almost crushed. He could feel through the leaf how hot the lips of the young man were, and the rose had opened, as if from the heat of the noonday sun. There came another man who looked gloomy and wicked. He was the wicked brother of the beautiful maiden. He drew out a sharp knife, and while the other was kissing the rose, the wicked man stabbed him to death. Then he cut off his head and buried it with the body in the soft earth under the linden tree. Now he is gone and will soon be forgotten, thought the wicked brother. He will never come back again. He was going on a long journey over mountains and seas. It is easy for a man to lose his life in such a journey. My sister will suppose he is dead, for he cannot come back, and she will not dare to question me about him. Then he scattered the dry leaves over the light earth with his foot, and went home through the darkness. But he went not alone, as he thought. The little elf accompanied him. He sat in a dry, rolled-up linden leaf, which had fallen from the tree onto the wicked man's head as he was digging the grave. The hat was on the head now, which made it very dark, and the little elf shuddered with fright and indignation at the wicked deed. It was the dawn of morning before the wicked man reached home. He took off his hat and went into his sister's room. There lay the beautiful, blooming girl, dreaming of him whom she loved so, and who was now, she supposed, traveling far away over mountain and sea. Her wicked brother stopped over her and laughed hideously, as fiends only can laugh. The dry leaf fell out of his hair upon the counterpane, but he did not notice it, and went to get a little sleep during the early morning hours. But the elf slipped out of the withered leaf, placed himself by the ear of the sleeping girl, and told her, as in a dream, of the horrid murder, described the place where her brother had slain her lover and buried his body, and told her of the linden tree in full blossom that stood close by. That you may not think this is only a dream that I have told you, he said. You will find on your bed a withered leaf. Then she awoke and found it there. Oh, what bitter tears she shed, and she could not open her heart to anyone for relief. The window stood open the whole day, and the little elf could easily have reached the roses or any of the flowers, but he could not find it in his heart to leave one so afflicted. In the window stood a bush bearing monthly roses. he seated himself in one of the flowers and gazed on the poor girl. Her brother often came into the room and would be quite cheerful in spite of his base conduct. So she dare not say a word to him of her heart's grief. As soon as night came on, she slipped out of the house and went into the wood, to the spot where the linden tree stood. And after removing the leaves from the earth, she turned it up, and there found him who had been murdered. Oh, how she wept and prayed that she also might die. Gladly would she have taken the body home with her, but that was impossible. So she took up the poor head with the closed eyes, kissed the cold lips, and shook the mold out of the beautiful hair. "I will keep this," said she. And as soon as she had covered the body again with the earth and leaves, she took the head and a little sprig of jasmine that bloomed in the wood near the spot where he was buried, and carried them home with her. As soon as she was in her room, she took the largest flower pot she could find, and in this she placed the head of the dead man, covered it up with earth, and planted the twig of jasmine in it. "Farewell, farewell," whispered the little elf. He could not any longer endure to witness all this agony of grief. He therefore flew away to his own rose in the garden. But the rose was faded. Only a few dry leaves still clung to the green hedge behind it. Alas, how soon all that is good and beautiful passes away, sighed the elf. After a while, he found another rose, which became his home, for among its delicate, fragrant leaves, he could dwell in safety. Every morning, he flew to the window of the poor girl, and always found her weeping by the flower pot. The bitter tears fell upon the jasmine twig, and each day, as she became paler and paler, the sprig appeared to grow greener and fresher. One shoot after another sprouted forth, and little white buds blossomed, which the poor girl fondly kissed. But her wicked brother scolded her and asked her if she was going mad. He could not imagine why she was weeping over that flower pot, and it annoyed him. He did not know whose closed eyes were there, nor what red lips were fading beneath the earth. And one day she sat and leaned her head against the flower pot, and the little elf of the rose found her asleep. Then he seated himself by her ear, talked to her of that evening in the arbor, of the sweet perfume of the rose, and the loves of the elves. Sweetly she dreamed, and while she dreamt, her life passed away calmly and gently, and her spirit was with him whom she loved in heaven. And the jasmine opened its large white bells and spread forth its sweet fragrance. It had no other way of showing its grief for the dead. But the wicked brother considered the beautiful blooming plant as his own property, left to him by his sister, and he placed it in his sleeping room, close by his bed, for it was very lovely in appearance, and the fragrance sweet and delightful. The little elf of the rose followed it, and flew from flower to flower, telling each little spirit that dwelt in them the story of the murdered young man, whose head now formed part of the earth beneath them, and of the wicked brother and the poor sister. "We know it," said each little spirit in the flowers. "We know it, for have we not sprung from the eyes and lips of the murdered one? We know it. We know it." And the flowers nodded with their heads in a peculiar manner. The elf of the rose could not understand how they could rest so quietly in the matter. So he flew to the bees who were gathering honey and told them of the wicked brother. And the bees told it to their queen, who commanded that the next morning they should go and kill the murderer. But during the night, the first after the sister's death, while the brother was sleeping in his bed, close to where he had placed the fragrant jasmine, every flower cup opened, and invisibly the little spirits stole out, armed with poisonous spears. They placed themselves by the ear of the sleeper, told him dreadful dreams, and then flew across his lips and pricked his tongue with their poisoned spears. "Now have we revenged the dead," said they, and flew back into the white bells of the jasmine flowers. When the morning came, and as soon as the window was opened, the rose elf with the queen bee and the whole swarm of bees rushed in to kill him. But he was already dead. People were standing round the bed and saying that the scent of the jasmine had killed him. Then the elf of the rose understood the revenge of the flowers and explained it to the queen bee. And she, with the whole swarm, buzzed about the flower pot. The bees could not be driven away. Then a man took it up to remove it, and one of the bees stung him in the hand, so that he let the flower pot fall, and it was broken to pieces. Then everyone saw the whitened skull, and they knew the dead man in the bed was a murderer. And the queen bee hummed in the air and sang of the revenge of the flowers and of the elf of the rose, and said that behind the smallest leaf dwells one who can discover evil deeds and punish them also. The Garden of Paradise. There was once a king's son who had a larger and more beautiful collection of books than anyone else in the world, and full of splendid copper plate engravings. He could read and obtain information respecting every people of every land, but not a word could he find to explain the situation of the Garden of Paradise. And this was just what he most wished to know. His grandmother had told him when he was quite a little boy, just old enough to go to school, that each flower in the Garden of Paradise was a sweet cake, that the pistils were full of rich wine, that on one flower history was written, on another geography, or tables. So those who wished to learn their lessons had only to eat some of the cakes. And the more they ate, the more history, geography, or tables they knew. He believed it all then. But as he grew older and learnt more and more, he became wise enough to understand that the splendor of the Garden of Paradise must be very different to all this. Oh, why did Eve pluck the fruit from the tree of knowledge? Why did Adam eat the forbidden fruit? Thought the king's son. If I had been there, it would never have happened, and there would have been no sin in the world. The Garden of Paradise occupied all his thoughts till he reached his 17th year. One day, he was walking alone in the wood, which was his greatest pleasure, when evening came on. The clouds gathered, and the rain poured down as if the sky had been a waterspout, and it was as dark as the bottom of a well at midnight. Sometimes he slipped over the smooth grass or fell over stones that projected out of the rocky ground. Everything was dripping with moisture, and the poor prince had not a dry thread about him. He was obliged at last to climb over great blocks of stone, with water spurting from the thick moss. He began to feel quite faint when he heard a most singular rushing noise and saw before him a large cave from which came a blaze of light. In the middle of the cave, an immense fire was burning, and a noble stag with its branching horns was placed on a spit between the trunks of 2 pine trees. It was turning slowly before the fire, and an elderly woman, as large and strong as if she had been a man in disguise, sat by, throwing one piece of wood after another into the flames. "Come in," she said to the prince. "Sit down by the fire and dry yourself." "There is a great draught here," said the prince as he seated himself on the ground. "It will be worse when my sons come home," replied the woman. "You are now in the cavern of the winds, and my sons are the 4 winds of heaven. Can you understand that?" "Where are your sons?" asked the prince. "It is difficult to answer stupid questions," said the woman. "My sons have plenty of business on hand. They are playing at shuttlecock with the clouds up yonder in the king's hall." And she pointed upwards. "Oh, indeed," said the prince. "But you speak more roughly and harshly, and are not so gentle as the women I am used to." "Yes, that is because they have nothing else to do. But I am obliged to be harsh, to keep my boys in order. And I can do it, although they are so headstrong. Do you see those 4 sacks hanging on the wall? Well, they are just as much afraid of those sacks as you used to be of the rat behind the looking glass. I can bend the boys together and put them in the sacks without any resistance on their parts. I can tell you, there they stay, and dare not attempt to come out until I allow them to do so. And here comes one of them." It was the north wind who came in, bringing with him a cold, piercing blast. Large hailstones rattled on the floor, and snowflakes were scattered around in all directions. He wore a bearskin dress and cloak. His sealskin cap was drawn over his ears. Long icicles hung from his beard, and one hailstone after another rolled from the collar of his jacket. "Don't go too near the fire," said the prince, "or your hands and face will be frostbitten." "Frostbitten," said the north wind with a loud laugh. "Why, frost is my greatest delight. What sort of a little snip are you, and how did you find your way to the cavern of the winds?" "He is my guest," said the old woman, "and if you are not satisfied with that explanation, you can go into the sack. Do you understand me?" That settled the matter. So the north wind began to relate his adventures, whence he came, and where he had been for a whole month. "I come from the polar seas," he said. "I have been on the Bear's Island with the Russian walrus hunters. I sat and slept at the helm of their ship as they sailed away from North Cape. Sometimes when I woke, the storm birds would fly about my legs. They are curious birds. They give one flap with their wings, and then on their outstretched pinions soar far away. Don't make such a long story of it," said the mother of the winds. "What sort of a place is Bear's Island?" "A very beautiful place, with a floor for dancing as smooth and flat as a plate. Half melted snow, partly covered with moss, sharp stones, and skeletons of walruses and polar bears lie all about, their gigantic limbs in a state of green decay. It would seem as if the sun never shone there. I blew gently to clear away the mist, and then I saw a little hut which had been built from the wood of a wreck and was covered with the skins of the walrus, the fleshy side outwards. It looked green and red, and on the roof sat a growling bear. Then I went to the seashore to look after birds' nests, and saw the unfledged nestlings opening their mouths and screaming for food. I blew into the 1,000 little throats and quickly stopped their screaming. Farther on were the walruses with pigs' heads and teeth a yard long, rolling about like great worms. "You relate your adventures very well, my son," said the mother. "It makes my mouth water to hear you." After that, continued the north wind, the hunting commenced. The harpoon was flung into the breast of the walrus, so that a smoking stream of blood spurted forth like a fountain and besprinkled the ice. Then I thought of my own game. I began to blow and set my own ships, the great icebergs, sailing so that they might crush the boats. Oh, how the sailors howled and cried out. But I howled louder than they. They were obliged to unload their cargo, and throw their chests and the dead walruses on the ice. Then I sprinkled snow over them and left them in their crushed boats to drift southward and to taste salt water. They will never return to Bear's Island. So you have done mischief, said the Mother of the Winds. I shall leave others to tell the good I have done, he replied. But here comes my brother from the west. I like him best of all, for he has the smell of the sea about him and brings in a cold, fresh air as he enters. Is that the little Zephyr? Asked the prince. Yes, it is the little Zephyr, said the old woman. But he is not little now. In years gone by, he was a beautiful boy. Now that is all past. He came in looking like a wild man, and he wore a slouched hat to protect his head from injury. In his hand, he carried a club cut from a mahogany tree in the American forests, not a trifle to carry. Whence do you come? Asked the mother. I come from the wilds of the forests, where the thorny brambles form thick hedges between the trees, where the water snake lies in the wet grass, and mankind seem to be unknown. What were you doing there? I looked into the deep river and saw it rushing down from the rocks. The water drops mounted to the clouds and glittered in the rainbow. I saw the wild buffalo swimming in the river, but the strong tide carried him away amidst a flock of wild ducks, which flew into the air as the waters dashed onwards, leaving the buffalo to be hurled over the waterfall. This pleased me, so I raised a storm which rooted up old trees and sent them floating down the river. And what else have you done? Asked the old woman. I have rushed wildly across the savannas. I have stroked the wild horses and shaken the cocoa nuts from the trees. Yes, I have many stories to relate, but I need not tell everything I know. You know it all very well, don't you, old lady? And he kissed his mother so roughly that she nearly fell backwards. Oh, he was indeed a wild fellow. Now in came the south wind, with a turban and a flowing Bedouin cloak. How cold it is here, said he, throwing more wood on the fire. It is easy to feel that the north wind has arrived here before me. Why, it is hot enough here to roast a bear, said the north wind. You are a bear yourself, said the other. Do you want to be put in the sack, both of you? Said the old woman. Sit down now on that stone yonder and tell me where you have been. In Africa, mother. I went out with the Hottentots, who were lion hunting in the Kaffir land, where the plains are covered with grass the color of a green olive. And here I ran races with the ostrich, but I soon outstripped him in swiftness. At last I came to the desert, in which lie the golden sands, looking like the bottom of the sea. Here I met a caravan, and the travelers had just killed their last camel to obtain water, there was very little for them, and they continued their painful journey beneath the burning sun and over the hot sands, which stretched before them a vast, boundless desert. Then I rolled myself in the loose sand and whirled it in burning columns over their heads. The dromedaries stood still in terror, while the merchants drew their caftans over their heads and threw themselves on the ground before me, as they do before Allah, their God. Then I buried them beneath a pyramid of sand, which covers them all. When I blow that away on my next visit, the sun will bleach their bones, and travelers will see that others have been there before them. Otherwise, in such a wild desert, they might not believe it possible. So you have done nothing but evil, said the mother. Into the sack with you. And before he was aware, she had seized the south wind round the body and popped him into the bag. He rolled about on the floor till she sat herself upon him to keep him still. These boys of yours are very lively, said the prince. Yes, she replied, but I know how to correct them when necessary. And here comes the fourth. In came the east wind, dressed like a Chinese. Oh, you come from that quarter, do you? Said she. I thought you had been to the Garden of Paradise. I am going there tomorrow, he replied. I have not been there for 100 years. I have just come from China, where I danced round the porcelain tower till all the bells jingled again. In the streets, an official flogging was taking place, and bamboo canes were being broken on the shoulders of men of every high position, from the 1st to the 9th grade. They cried, "Many thanks, my fatherly benefactor." But I am sure the words did not come from their hearts. So I rang the bells till they sounded. Ding, ding, dong. You are a wild boy, said the old woman. It is well for you that you are going tomorrow to the Garden of Paradise. You always get improved in your education there. Drink deeply from the fountain of wisdom while you are there, and bring home a bottleful for me. That I will, said the east wind. But why have you put my brother south in a bag? Let him out, for I want him to tell me about the phoenix bird. The princess always wants to hear of this bird when I pay her my visit every 100 years. If you will open the sack, sweetest mother, I will give you 2 pocketfuls of tea, green and fresh as when I gathered it from the spot where it grew. Well, for the sake of the tea, and because you are my own boy, I will open the bag. She did so, and the south wind crept out, looking quite cast down, because the prince had seen his disgrace. There is a palm leaf for the princess, he said. The old phoenix, the only one in the world gave it to me himself. He has scratched on it with his beak the whole of his history during the 100 years he has lived. She can there read how the old phoenix set fire to his own nest and sat upon it while it was burning. Like a Hindu widow, the dry twigs around the nest crackled and smoked till the flames burst forth and consumed the phoenix to ashes. Amidst the fire lay an egg, red hot, which presently burst with a loud report, and out flew a young bird. He is the only phoenix in the world, and the king over all the other birds. He has bitten a hole in the leaf which I give you, and that is his greeting to the princess. Now, let us have something to eat, said the mother of the winds. So they all sat down to feast on the roasted stag. And as the prince sat by the side of the east wind, they soon became good friends. Pray tell me, said the prince, who is that princess of whom you have been talking? And where lies the garden of paradise? Oh, said the east wind. Would you like to go there? Well, you can fly off with me tomorrow. But I must tell you one thing. No human being has been there since the time of Adam and Eve. I suppose you have read of them in your Bible? Of course I have, said the prince. Well, continued the east wind, when they were driven out of the garden of paradise, it sunk into the earth, but it retained its warm sunshine, its balmy air, and all its splendor. The fairy queen lives there, in the island of happiness, where death never comes, and all is beautiful. I can manage to take you there tomorrow, if you will sit on my back. But now, don't talk anymore, for I want to go to sleep. And then they all slept. When the prince awoke in the early morning, he was not a little surprised at finding himself high up above the clouds. He was seated on the back of the east wind, who held him faithfully. And they were so high in the air that woods and fields, rivers and lakes, as they lay beneath them, looked like a painted map. Good morning, said the east wind. You might have slept on a while, for there is very little to see in the flat country over which we are passing, unless you like to count the churches. They look like spots of chalk on a green board. The green board was the name he gave to the green fields and meadows. It was very rude of me not to say goodbye to your mother and your brothers, said the prince. They will excuse you, as you were asleep, said the east wind. And then they flew on faster than ever. The leaves and branches of the trees rustled as they passed. When they flew over seas and lakes, the waves rose higher, and the large ships dipped into the water like diving swans. As darkness came on, towards evening, the great towns looked charming. Lights were sparkling, now seen, now hidden, just as the sparks go out, one after another, on a piece of burnt paper. The prince clapped his hands with pleasure, but the east wind advised him not to express his admiration in that manner, or he might fall down and find himself hanging on a church steeple. The eagle in the dark forests flies swiftly, but faster than he flew the east wind. The Cossack, on his small horse, rides lightly over the plains, but lighter still past the prince on the winds of the wind. There are the Himalayas, the highest mountains in Asia, said the east wind. We shall soon reach the Garden of Paradise now. Then they turned southward, and the air became fragrant with the perfume of spices and flowers. Here figs and pomegranates grew wild, and the vines were covered with clusters of blue and purple grapes. Here they both descended to the earth and stretched themselves on the soft grass, while the flowers bowed to the breath of the wind as if to welcome it. Are we now in the Garden of Paradise? Asked the prince. No, indeed, replied the east wind, but we shall be there very soon. Do you see that wall of rocks and the cavern beneath it, over which the grapevines hang like a green curtain? Through that cavern we must pass. Wrap your cloak round you, for while the sun scorches you here, a few steps farther, it will be icy cold. The bird flying past the entrance to the cavern feels as if one wing were in the region of summer, and the other in the depths of winter. So this then is the way to the Garden of Paradise? Asked the prince as they entered the cavern. It was indeed cold, but the cold soon passed, for the east wind spread his wings, and they gleamed like the brightest fire. As they passed on through this wonderful cave, the prince could see great blocks of stone, from which water trickled, hanging over their heads in fantastic shapes. Sometimes it was so narrow that they had to creep on their hands and knees, while at other times it was lofty and wide, like the free air. It had the appearance of a chapel for the dead, with petrified organs and silent pipes. We seem to be passing through the valley of death to the Garden of Paradise, said the prince. But the east wind answered not a word, only pointed forwards to a lovely blue light which gleamed in the distance. The blocks of stone assumed a misty appearance, till at last they looked like white clouds in moonlight. The air was fresh and balmy, like a breeze from the mountains, perfumed with flowers from a valley of roses. A river, clear as the air itself, sparkled at their feet, while in its clear depths could be seen gold and silver fish sporting in the bright water, and purple eels emitting sparks of fire at every moment, while the broad leaves of the water lilies that floated on its surface flickered with all the colors of the rainbow. The flower, in its color of flame, seemed to receive its nourishment from the water, as a lamp is sustained by oil. A marble bridge of such exquisite workmanship that it appeared as if formed of lace and pearls, led to the island of happiness in which bloomed the garden of paradise. The east wind took the prince in his arms and carried him over, while the flowers and the leaves sang the sweet songs of his childhood in tones so full and soft that no human voice could venture to imitate. Within the garden grew large trees, full of sap, but whether they were palm trees or gigantic water plants, the prince knew not. The climbing plants hung in garlands of green and gold, like the illuminations on the margins of old missals, or twined among the initial letters. Birds, flowers, and festoons appeared intermingled in seeming confusion. Close by, on the grass, stood a group of peacocks, with radiant tails outspread to the sun. The prince touched them, and found, to his surprise, that they were not really birds, but the leaves of the burdock tree, which shone with the colors of a peacock's tail. The lion and the tiger, gentle and tame, were springing about like playful cats among the green bushes, whose perfume was like the fragrant blossom of the olive. The plumage of the wood pigeon glistened like pearls as it struck the lion's mane with its wings, while the antelope, usually so shy, stood near, nodding its head as if it wished to join in the frolic. The fairy of paradise next made her appearance. Her raiment shone like the sun, and her serene countenance beamed with happiness, like that of a mother rejoicing over her child. She was young and beautiful, and a train of lovely maidens followed her, each wearing a bright star in her hair. The east wind gave her the palm leaf on which was written the history of the phoenix, and her eyes sparkled with joy. She then took the prince by the hand and led him into her palace, the walls of which were richly colored, like a tulip leaf when it is turned to the sun. The roof had the appearance of an inverted flower, and the colors grew deeper and brighter to the gazer. The prince walked to a window and saw what appeared to be the tree of knowledge of good and evil, with Adam and Eve standing by, and the serpent near them. "I thought they were banished from paradise," he said. The princess smiled and told him that time had engraved each event on a window pane in the form of a picture. But unlike other pictures, all that it represented lived and moved. The leaves rustled, and the persons went and came, as in a looking glass. He looked through another pane and saw the ladder in Jacob's dream, on which the angels were ascending and descending with outspread wings. All that had ever happened in the world here lived and moved on the panes of glass, in pictures such as time alone could produce. The fairy now led the prince into a large, lofty room with transparent walls, through which the light shone. Here were portraits, each one appearing more beautiful than the other. Millions of happy beings whose laughter and song mingled in one sweet melody. Some of these were in such an elevated position that they appeared smaller than the smallest rosebud, or like pencil dots on paper. In the center of the hall stood a tree with drooping branches from which hung golden apples, both great and small, looking like oranges amid the green leaves. It was the tree of knowledge of good and evil, from which Adam and Eve had plucked and eaten the forbidden fruit. And from each leaf trickled a bright red dewdrop, as if the tree were weeping tears of blood for their sin. "Let us now take the boat," said the fairy. "A sail on the cool waters will refresh us, but we shall not move from the spot. Although the boat may rock on the swelling water, the countries of the world will glide before us, but we shall remain still." It was indeed wonderful to behold. First came the lofty Alps, snow-clad, and covered with clouds and dark pines. The horn resounded, and the shepherds sang merrily in the valleys. The banana trees bent their drooping branches over the boat. Black swans floated on the water, and singular animals and flowers appeared on the distant shore. New Holland, the fifth division of the world, now glided by, with mountains in the background, looking blue in the distance. They heard the song of the priests, and saw the wild dance of the savage to the sound of the drums and trumpets of bone. The pyramids of Egypt rising to the clouds, columns and sphinxes, overthrown and buried in the sand, followed in their turn, while the northern lights flashed out over the extinguished volcanoes of the north in fireworks none could imitate. The prince was delighted, and yet he saw hundreds of other wonderful things, more than can be described. "Can I stay here forever?" asked he. "That depends upon yourself," replied the fairy. "If you do not, like Adam, long for what is forbidden, you can remain here always." "I should not touch the fruit on the tree of knowledge," said the prince. "There is abundance of fruit equally beautiful." "Examine your own heart," said the princess, "and if you do not feel sure of its strength, return with the east wind who brought you. He is about to fly back, and will not return here for 100 years. The time will not seem to you more than 100 hours, yet even that is a long time for temptation and resistance. Every evening, when I leave you, I shall be obliged to say, 'Come with me,' and to beckon to you with my hand. But you must not listen, nor move from your place to follow me. For with every step, you will find your power to resist weaker. If once you attempted to follow me, you would soon find yourself in the hall, where grows the tree of knowledge. for I sleep beneath its perfumed branches. If you stooped over me, I should be forced to smile. If you then kissed my lips, the garden of paradise would sink into the earth, and to you it would be lost. A keen wind from the desert would howl around you. Cold rain fall on your head, and sorrow and woe be your future lot. I will remain, said the prince. So the east wind kissed him on the forehead and said, Be firm. Then shall we meet again when 100 years have passed. Farewell. Farewell. Then the east wind spread his broad pinions, which shone like the lightning in harvest, or as the northern lights in a cold winter. Farewell, farewell, echoed the trees and the flowers. Storks and pelicans flew after him in feathery bands to accompany him to the boundaries of the garden. Now we will commence dancing, said the fairy. And when it is nearly over at sunset, while I am dancing with you, I shall make a sign and ask you to follow me. But do not obey. I shall be obliged to repeat the same thing for 100 years. And each time, when the trial is past, if you resist, you will gain strength, till resistance becomes easy, and at last the temptation will be quite overcome. This evening, as it will be the first time, I have warned you. After this, the fairy led him into a large hall filled with transparent lilies. The yellow stamina of each flower formed a tiny golden harp, from which came forth strains of music, like the mingled tones of flute and lyre. Beautiful maidens, slender and graceful in form, and robed in transparent gauze, floated through the dance and sang of the happy life in the garden of paradise, where death never entered, and where all would bloom forever in immortal youth. As the sun went down, the whole heavens became crimson and gold, and tinted the lilies with the hue of roses. Then the beautiful maidens offered to the prince sparkling wine, and when he had drank, he felt happiness greater than he had ever known before. Presently, the background of the hall opened, and the tree of knowledge appeared, surrounded by a halo of glory that almost blinded him. Voices, soft and lovely as his mother's, sounded in his ears, as if she were singing to him, "My child, my beloved child." Then the fairy beckoned to him and said in sweet accents, "Come with me, come with me." Forgetting his promise, forgetting it even on the very first evening, he rushed towards her, while she continued to beckon to him and to smile. The fragrance around him overpowered his senses. The music from the harps sounded more entrancing, while around the tree appeared millions of smiling faces, nodding and singing. Man should know everything, Man is the Lord of the earth. The tree of knowledge no longer wept tears of blood, for the dewdrops shone like glittering stars. Come, come, continued that thrilling voice, and the prince followed the call. At every step, his cheeks glowed, and the blood rushed wildly through his veins. I must follow, he cried. It is not a sin. It cannot be to follow beauty and joy. I only want to see her sleep, and nothing will happen unless I kiss her, and that I will not do, for I have strength to resist and a determined will. The fairy threw off her dazzling attire, bent back the boughs, and in another moment was hidden among them. I have not sinned yet, said the prince, and I will not. And then he pushed aside the boughs to follow the princess. She was lying already asleep, beautiful as only a fairy in the garden of paradise could be. She smiled as he bent over her, and he saw tears trembling out of her beautiful eyelashes. Do you weep for me? He whispered. Oh, weep not, thou loveliest of women. Now do I begin to understand the happiness of paradise. I feel it to my inmost soul. In every thought, a new life is born within me. One moment of such happiness is worth an eternity of darkness and woe. He stooped and kissed the tears from her eyes and touched her lips with his. A clap of thunder, loud and awful, resounded through the trembling air. All around him fell into ruin. The lovely fairy, the beautiful garden, sunk deeper and deeper. The prince saw it sinking down in the dark night till it shone only like a star in the distance beneath him. Then he felt a coldness, like death, creeping over him. His eyes closed, and he became insensible. When he recovered, a chilling rain was beating upon him, and a sharp wind blew on his head. Alas, what have I done? He sighed. I have sinned like Adam, and the garden of paradise has sunk into the earth. He opened his eyes and saw the star in the distance, but it was the morning star in heaven, which glittered in the darkness. Presently, he stood up and found himself in the depths of the forest, close to the cavern of the winds, and the mother of the winds sat by his side. She looked angry and raised her arm in the air as she spoke. The very first evening, she said. Well, I expected it. If you were my son, you should go into the sack. And there he will have to go at last, said a strong old man with large black wings and a scythe in his hand, whose name was Death. He shall be laid in his coffin, but not yet. I will allow him to wander about the world for a while, to atone for his sin, and to give him time to become better. But I shall return when he least expects me. I shall lay him in a black coffin, place it on my head, and fly away with it beyond the stars. There also blooms a garden of paradise, and if he is good and pious, he will be enchanted. But if his thoughts are bad, and his heart is full of sin, he will sink with his coffin deeper than the garden of paradise has sunk. Once in every 1,000 years, I shall go and fetch him, when he will either be condemned to sink still deeper, or be raised to a happier life in the world beyond the stars. The Flying Trunk. There was once a merchant who was so rich that he could have paved the whole street with gold, and would even then have had enough for a small alley. But he did not do so. He knew the value of money better than to use it in this way. So clever was he that every shilling he put out brought him a crown. And so he continued till he died. His son inherited his wealth, and he lived a merry life with it. He went to a masquerade every night, made kites out of 5-pound notes, and threw pieces of gold into the sea instead of stones, making ducks and drakes of them. In this manner, he soon lost all his money. At last, he had nothing left but a pair of slippers, an old dressing gown, and 4 shillings. And now all his friends deserted him. They could not walk with him in the streets. But one of them, who was very good-natured, sent him an old trunk with this message: "Pack up." "Yes," he said. It is all very well to say, "Pack up." But he had nothing left to pack up. Therefore he seated himself in the trunk. It was a very wonderful trunk. No sooner did anyone press on the lock than the trunk could fly. He shut the lid and pressed the lock, when away flew the trunk up the chimney with the merchant's son in it, right up into the clouds. Whenever the bottom of the trunk cracked, he was in a great fright, for if the trunk fell to pieces, he would have made a tremendous somerset over the trees. However, he got safely in his trunk to the land of Turkey. He hid the trunk in the wood under some dry leaves, and then went into the town. He could so this very well, for the Turks always go about dressed in dressing gowns and slippers, as he was himself. He happened to meet a nurse with a little child. "I say, you Turkish nurse," cried he, "what castle is that near the town, with the windows placed so high?" "The king's daughter lives there," she replied. "It has been prophesied that she will be very unhappy about a lover, and therefore no one is allowed to visit her, unless the king and queen are present." "Thank you," said the merchant's son. So he went back to the wood, seated himself in his trunk, flew up to the roof of the castle, and crept through the window into the princess's room. She lay on the sofa asleep, and she was so beautiful that the merchant's son could not help kissing her. Then she awoke and was very much frightened. But he told her he was a Turkish angel who had come down through the air to see her, which pleased her very much. He sat down by her side and talked to her. He said her eyes were like beautiful dark lakes in which the thoughts swam about like little mermaids. And he told her that her forehead was a snowy mountain which contained splendid halls full of pictures. And then he related to her about the stork who brings the beautiful children from the rivers. These were delightful stories. And when he asked the princess if she would marry him, she consented immediately. "But you must come on Saturday," she said, "for then the king and queen will take tea with me. They will be very proud when they find that I am going to marry a Turkish angel. But you must think of some very pretty stories to tell them, for my parents like to hear stories better than anything. My mother prefers one that is deep and moral, but my father likes something funny to make him laugh." "Very well," he replied. "I shall bring you no other marriage portion than a story." And so they parted. But the princess gave him a sword which was studded with gold coins, and these he could use. Then he flew away to the town and bought a new dressing gown, and afterwards returned to the wood, where he composed a story so as to be ready for Saturday, which was no easy matter. It was ready, however, by Saturday, when he went to see the princess. The king and queen and the whole court were at tea with the princess, and he was received with great politeness. "Will you tell us a story?" said the queen. "One that is instructive and full of deep learning." "Yes, but with something in it to laugh at," said the king. "Certainly," he replied, and commenced at once, asking them to listen attentively. "There was once a bundle of matches that were exceedingly proud of their high descent. Their genealogical tree, that is, a large pine tree from which they had been cut, was at one time a large old tree in the wood. The matches now lay between a tinder box and an old iron saucepan, and were talking about their youthful days. Ah, then we grew on the green boughs, and were as green as they. Every morning and evening we were fed with diamond drops of dew. Whenever the sun shone, we felt his warm rays, and the little birds would relate stories to us as they sung. We knew that we were rich, for the other trees only wore their green dress in summer. But our family were able to array themselves in green, summer, and winter. But the woodcutter came, like a great revolution, and our family fell under the axe. The head of the house obtained a situation as mainmast in a very fine ship. and can sail round the world when he will. The other branches of the family were taken to different places, and our office now is to kindle a light for common people. This is how such high-born people as we came to be in a kitchen. Mine has been a very different fate, said the iron pot, which stood by the matches. From my first entrance into the world, I have been used to cooking and scouring. I am the first in this house when anything solid or useful is required. My only pleasure is to be made clean and shining after dinner, and to sit in my place and have a little sensible conversation with my neighbors. All of us, excepting the water bucket, which is sometimes taken into the courtyard, live here together within these four walls. We get our news from the market basket, but he sometimes tells us very unpleasant things about the people and the government. Yes, and one day an old pot was so alarmed that he fell down and was broken to pieces. He was a liberal, I can tell you. You are talking too much, said the tinderbox, and the steel struck against the flint till some sparks flew out, crying, "We want a merry evening, don't we?" Yes, of course, said the matches. Let us talk about those who are the highest born. No, I don't like to be always talking of what we are, remarked the saucepan. Let us think of some other amusement. I will begin. We will tell something that has happened to ourselves. That will be very easy and interesting as well. On the Baltic Sea, near the Danish shore. What a pretty commencement, said the plates. We shall all like that story, I am sure. Yes, well, in my youth, I lived in a quiet family where the furniture was polished, the floors scoured, and clean curtains put up every fortnight. What an interesting way you have of relating a story, said the carpet broom. It is easy to perceive that you have been a great deal in women's society. There is something so pure runs through what you say. That is quite true, said the water bucket. And he made a spring with joy and splashed some water on the floor. Then the saucepan went on with his story, and the end was as good as the beginning. The plates rattled with pleasure, and the carpet broom brought some green parsley out of the dust hole and crowned the saucepan, for he knew it would vex the others. And he thought, if I crown him today, he will crown me tomorrow. Now, let us have a dance, said the fire tongs. And then how they danced and stuck up one leg in the air. The chair cushion in the corner burst with laughter when she saw it. Shall I be crowned now? Asked the fire tongs. So the broom found another wreath for the tongs. They were only common people after all, thought the matches. The tea urn was now asked to sing, but she said she had a cold and could not sing without boiling heat They all thought this was affectation. And because she did not wish to sing, excepting in the parlor, when on the table with the grand people, in the window sat an old quill pen, with which the maid generally wrote. There was nothing remarkable about the pen, excepting that it had been dipped too deeply in the ink, but it was proud of that. If the tea urn won't sing, said the pen, she can leave it alone. There is a nightingale in a cage who can sing. She has not been taught much, certainly, but we need not say anything this evening about that. I think it highly improper, said the tea kettle, who was kitchen singer and half-brother to the tea urn, that a rich foreign bird should be listened to here. Is it patriotic? Let the market basket decide what is right. I certainly am vexed, said the basket, inwardly vexed, more than anyone can imagine. Are we spending the evening properly? Would it not be more sensible to put the house in order? If each were in his own place, I would lead a game. This would be quite another thing. Let us act a play, said they all. At the same moment, the door opened, and the maid came in. Then not one stirred. They all remained quite still. Yet, at the same time, there was not a single pot amongst them who had not a high opinion of himself and of what he could do if he chose. Yes, if we had chosen, they each thought, we might have spent a very pleasant evening. The maid took the matches and lighted them. Dear me, how they sputtered and blazed up. Now then, they thought, everyone will see that we are the first. How we shine, what a light we give. Even while they spoke, their light went out. What a capital story, said the queen. I feel as if I were really in the kitchen and could see the matches. Yes, you shall marry our daughter. Certainly, said the king. Thou shalt have our daughter. The king said thou to him because he was going to be one of the family. The wedding day was fixed, and on the evening before, the whole city was illuminated. Cakes and sweetmeats were thrown among the people. The street boys stood on tiptoe and shouted, "Hurrah!" and whistled between their fingers. Altogether, it was a very splendid affair. I will give them another treat, said the merchant's son. So he went and bought rockets and crackers and all sorts of fireworks that could be thought of, packed them in his trunk, and flew up with it into the air. What a whizzing and popping they made as they went off. The Turks, when they saw such a sight in the air, jumped so high that their slippers flew about their ears. It was easy to believe, after this, that the princess was really going to marry a Turkish angel. As soon as the merchant's son had come down in his flying trunk to the wood after the fireworks, he thought, I will go back into the town now and hear what they think of the entertainment. It was very natural that he should wish to know. And what strange things people did say, to be sure. Everyone whom he questioned had a different tale to tell, though they all thought it very beautiful. "I saw the Turkish angel myself," said one. "He had eyes like glittering stars, and a head like foaming water. He flew in a mantle of fire," cried another, "and lovely little cherubs peeped out from the folds." He heard many more fine things about himself, and that the next day he was to be married. After this, he went back to the forest to rest himself in his trunk. It had disappeared. A spark from the fireworks which remained had set it on fire. It was burnt to ashes. So the merchant's son could not fly any more, nor go to meet his bride. She stood all day on the roof, waiting for him. And most likely, she is waiting there still, while he wanders through the world telling fairy tales, but none of them so amusing as the one he related about the matches. The Storks. On the very edge of a quiet little village, where the fields began and the marshes breathed their soft mist in the evenings, stood a small white house with a thatched roof. Upon its chimney, high above the hum of human life, the storks had built their home, a wide nest made of twigs, straw, and forgotten ribbons carried from gardens and barns. There, the mother stork sat, proud and serene, with her 4 downy children beneath her wings. Their long necks were still soft and uncertain, their beaks black and clumsy, not yet bright red like their parents. A little distance away, upon the roof ridge, stood the father stork, upright and stately, balancing on one leg. The other he tucked beneath him with such stillness that a passer-by might have thought him carved from dark wood. It must look very grand, he thought to himself. How noble I appear, like a sentry guarding my household. The people below surely believe that I am placed here by command, a true officer of the stork army. They do not know I am a husband keeping watch. Down in the dusty road, children were at play. They saw the storks, and one daring boy began to chant a teasing rhyme, his voice quick and mischievous. Soon, all joined in, shouting the verses as children do, half in song, half in laughter. Stork, stork, fly away, stand not on one leg, I pray. See, your wife is in her nest, with her little ones at rest. They will hang one and fry another. They will shoot a third and roast his brother. Listen to them, cried the young storks, frightened. They say we shall be hanged and roasted. Do not mind what they sing, said the mother gently. They are only children, and words cannot harm wings. But the boys kept pointing and mocking, their laughter echoing up to the roof. Only one child did not join in. A quiet boy named Peter. "It is cruel to make fun of the birds," he said, and turned away. The mother stork comforted her children. "Look at your father," she said, "how calm he stands, though the wind blows. That is true dignity." Yet the little ones trembled and drew their heads deep into the nest, whispering that perhaps the song was true. Next day, when the sun rose again, the children returned and sang louder than before. "They will hang one and roast another." "Will they really hang and roast us?" cried the little storks. "Certainly not," said the mother. "Soon I shall teach you to fly. Then we shall go to the meadows, and you shall see the frogs bow to us in the water, croaking, croak, croak, as if begging for mercy. And then we shall eat them. That will be your first feast." "And after that?" asked the eager young ones. "After that," said the mother, "all the storks in the country gather for the great autumn drill. The general inspects us all, and whoever cannot fly well is thrust through with his beak and sent tumbling into the reeds. So you must learn quickly." "Oh," gasped the children, "then it is true. They may kill us." "Not like the boys say," answered the mother. "And when we have passed the general's review, we shall travel far away, to Egypt, where the sun is kind and the air never freezes. There you will see mountains like giants and stone houses shaped like triangles that pierce the sky. They are called pyramids and are older than the oldest stork can remember. There runs a mighty river that swells and overflows its banks, leaving soft mud behind, full of delicious frogs." The young storks stretched their necks in wonder. "Oh, how beautiful it must be there." "Yes," said the mother dreamily. "While we stroll in the sunshine, eating and resting, the trees here will stand bare, and the water will turn to white dust that falls from the sky." "Will the naughty boys turn to white dust too?" asked one of the little ones. "No," said the mother, "but they will shiver and sit in dark rooms while we dance beneath the warm heavens." As the weeks passed, the young storks grew tall and sleek. Their feathers gleamed in the sunlight, and their father brought them frogs, snakes, and tender lizards to feast upon. He entertained them with stories of long journeys over seas and deserts, and when he clattered his beak, it sounded like laughter. At last came the day of lessons. "Now, my children," said the mother, "it is time to learn what wings are for." How they wobbled on the roof tiles. The wind tugged at their feathers, and the ground looked terribly far below. "Hold your heads high, your wings firm," said the mother. "Once, twice, like this, she spread her great wings and glided a little way. The young ones tried to follow, but down they tumbled into the thatch, flapping wildly. "I do not wish to fly," whined one. "I am comfortable here." "Would you rather stay till winter comes and the boys come to hang you?" said the mother sharply. "No, no," cried all four, and they tried again. By the third day, they could lift themselves into the air, though awkwardly. They fluttered around the chimney, proud as kings. The boys below came singing again. "Stork, stork, fly away." "Shall we swoop down and peck out their eyes?" asked the young storks. "No," said the mother. "Your time will come. Think now only of flying. 1, 2, 3, turn. Excellent. Tomorrow we go to the marshes. There will be many fine storks, and I expect you to behave with grace, for good manners make even feathers shine." Still, the young ones whispered among themselves, "We shall have our revenge one day." Of all the children, the smallest boy who began the mocking song was the most persistent. He sang louder than anyone, every single day. The young storks hated him most of all. They imagined him a giant, though he was only 6 years old. "We will remember him," they muttered. When autumn came, the sky filled with wings. Thousands of storks circled high above the fields, preparing for their long journey south. The young ones had practiced so well that they flew as gracefully as their elders. The general gave them high marks and even a reward: fat frogs and shining snakes. "Now," cried the young storks, "now let us take our revenge." "Yes," said the mother, "but I know a better way than yours. I know the pond where all the tiny babies lie dreaming, waiting for storks to bring them to their mothers. The sweetest, most beautiful babies rest there, smiling in their sleep. Every parent longs for such a gift." She spread her wings and continued, "We shall take a baby to every good child who never mocked us. But for the wicked boy who began the cruel song, we shall bring him something different." "What will we bring?" asked the young ones eagerly. "In the pond lies a little dead baby who dreamed itself to death," said the mother. "We will take it to that naughty boy, and when he sees it, he will weep bitterly. But to Peter, the kind child who defended us, we will bring two, a brother and a sister, for he has a good heart. And because he was kind, all storks henceforth shall bear his name. From now on, every stork shall be called Peter." So it happened. That night, the moon rose silver over the marshes as the storks flew away. Some carried sleeping babies, others the gift of sorrow to the unkind. And from that day to this, every stork in every nest wherever it stands in the world, is still called Peter. The Wicked Prince. There once lived a prince whose heart was darker than the iron crown upon his head. From his earliest days, he dreamt not of wisdom or beauty, but of conquest. To him, the world was a board, and its people were pieces meant to fall beneath his hand. He longed to see every banner bow before his own, and every throne sink under his power. Wherever he went, the earth trembled, not with reverence, but with terror. He sent forth his armies like swarms of locusts across the fields. The sound of their march was like the crackle of fire devouring dry wood. Villages burned, their red glow staining the sky for nights unending. Crops, once heavy with grain, were trampled into dust beneath iron boots. The humble cottages of peasants, those small nests of hope, crumbled into smoke and ashes. Trees stood like blackened skeletons, their leaves licked away by the flames. Mothers fled with their children, pressing tiny faces against their hearts as if to hide them from the cruelty of men who no longer remembered they were human. Even demons, it was said, might have blushed at the deeds of those soldiers. But the prince thought it all splendid and right. This, he said, is the course of nature. The strong must rule the weak, and the world, fearful of his sword, bent to him as reeds bend before the storm. Each victory filled his coffers with gold and his heart with vanity. He built palaces of marble and halls of glass that caught the sun and cast it back in 1,000 colors. His city gleamed like a jewel in the desert, and those who came to see it whispered in awe, "What a mighty prince!" Yet none of them heard the weeping from afar, the cries rising from broken nations, from mothers who searched the ruins for their children, from rivers red with sorrow. The prince would walk alone through his treasure halls at night, his reflection glittering back from the gold piled high. "What a mighty prince," he murmured, echoing the crowd. "But I must have more, much more. Let no hand, no power, no god stand above mine." He crushed every kingdom around him. Kings who once ruled proudly now crawled behind his chariot, chained by fetters of gold. They knelt before his table and ate the crumbs that fell from his plate. And still, the prince's hunger grew. Then pride whispered its final poison. He desired not only the earth, but the heavens. "If priests dare deny me my image upon the altars," he declared, "then I shall conquer their God as I conquered them." So he commanded the building of a marvelous ship, one that could sail through the very air. Its body shone like peacock feathers, covered with eyes that were each the mouth of a cannon. Within its heart sat the prince, surrounded by the hum of deadly invention. At the touch of a single spring, 1,000 bullets could scream forth and reload in the blink of an eye. Hundreds of eagles were yoked to the ship, and when their wings beat, the vessel rose like a flaming comet through the clouds. The earth below shrank, first a patchwork of fields and forests, then a map, and finally nothing but a pale blur of mist. Higher and higher he soared, until the sun itself seemed within reach. Then God sent an angel, radiant and calm, to meet the proud voyager. The prince fired his cannons, thunder without mercy, but each shot fell away, glancing harmlessly off the angel's shining wings. One drop of crimson fell from a feather and touched the ship's deck. It burned like molten iron, seared through the golden wood, and pulled the vessel downward with the weight of divine judgment. The eagles screamed, their wings tore, the air turned black with smoke. Clouds swirled and took monstrous forms, great claws and gaping maws, dragons of ash and flame. The prince, pale and trembling, clung to his throne as the ship plummeted, crashing at last among the tangled boughs of a forest, shattered and broken as his pride. Yet even then, his heart did not learn humility. "I will conquer, Gah," he cried through the ruins. "I will keep my vow." 7 years he labored. He built ships greater still, forged from steel and pride. His smiths crafted spears, hard enough, he boasted, to pierce the gates of heaven. From every land he gathered soldiers until their ranks stretched farther than the eye could see. An army vast as the sea, pitiless as stone. But before he could set foot upon his terrible fleet, God sent against him not fire, not thunder, not the sword, but a single swarm of gnats. They came humming through the air like living dust, and they stung his hands, his cheeks, his proud brow. The prince, furious, drew his sword and slashed at the empty air. The gnats danced lightly, unharmed. "Bring me my silks," he shouted. "Wrap me in gold. Cover me so that no gnat shall reach me." His servants obeyed, layering him in costly fabrics. But one small gnat had crept beneath the folds. It found the prince's ear and stung him there. The pain burned like a flame inside his skull. Madness followed close behind. He tore at his robes, at his flesh, screaming to the heavens. His soldiers watched in horror, then in mockery. For the conqueror of nations was undone by the smallest of God's creatures. And as he danced, raving beneath the pitiless sun, his armies scattered, his ships rusted where they stood, and his name was forgotten, save in stories told to children, where they learn that pride is heavier than stone, and that even the smallest hand of heaven can strike down the mightiest man on earth. Ole-Luk-Oie, the dream god. There is nobody in the world who knows so many stories as Ole-Luk-Oie, or who can relate them so nicely. In the evening, while the children are seated at the table or in their little chairs, he comes up the stairs very softly, for he walks in his socks. Then he opens the doors without the slightest noise and throws a small quantity of very fine dust in their eyes, just enough to prevent them from keeping them open, and so they do not see him. Then he creeps behind them and blows softly upon their necks till their heads begin to droop. But Ole-Luk-Oie does not wish to hurt them, for he is very fond of children and only wants them to be quiet, that he may relate to them pretty stories. And they never are quiet until they are in bed and asleep. As soon as they are asleep, Ole-Luk-Oie seats himself upon the bed. He is nicely dressed. His coat is made of silken stuff. It is impossible to say of what color, for it changes from green to red, and from red to blue as he turns from side to side. Under each arm, he carries an umbrella, one of them with pictures on the inside. He spreads over the good children, and then they dream the most beautiful stories the whole night. But the other umbrella has no pictures, and this he holds over the naughty children so that they sleep heavily and wake in the morning without having dreamed at all. Now we shall hear how Ole-Luk-Oie came every night during a whole week to the little boy named Hjalmar, and what he told him. There were 7 stories, as there are 7 days in the week. Monday. Now pay attention, said Ole-Luk-Oie in the evening when Hjalmar was in bed, and I will decorate the room. Immediately, all the flowers in the flower pots became large trees with long branches reaching to the ceiling and stretching along the walls, so that the whole room was like a greenhouse. All the branches were loaded with flowers, each flower as beautiful and as fragrant as a rose. And had anyone tasted them, he would have found them sweeter even than jam. The fruit glittered like gold, and there were cakes so full of plums that they were nearly bursting. It was incomparably beautiful. At the same time, sounded dismal moans from the table drawer in which lay Hjalmar's school books. What can that be now? Said Ole-Luk-Oie, going to the table and pulling out the drawer. It was a slate, in such distress because of a false number in the sum that it had almost broken itself to pieces. The pencil pulled and tugged at its string as if it were a little dog that wanted to help but could not. And then came a moan from Hjalmar's copybook. Oh, it was quite terrible to hear. On each leaf stood a row of capital letters, every one having a small letter by its side. This formed a copy. Under these were other letters, which Hjalmar had written. They fancied they looked like the copy, but they were mistaken, for they were leaning on one side as if they intended to fall over the pencil lines. "See, this is the way you should hold yourselves," said the copy. "Look here, you should slope thus, with a graceful curve." "Oh, we are very willing to do so, but we cannot," said Hjalmar's letters. "We are so wretchedly made." "You must be scratched out, then," said Ole-Luk-Oie. "Oh, no!" they cried. And then they stood up so gracefully, it was quite a pleasure to look at them. "Now, we must give up our stories and exercise these letters," said Ole-Luk-Oie. 1, 2, 1, 2. So he drilled them till they stood up gracefully and looked as beautiful as a copy could look. But after Ole-Luk-Oie was gone, and Hjalmar looked at them in the morning, they were as wretched and as awkward as ever. Tuesday. As soon as Hjalmar was in bed, Ole-Luk-Oie touched, with his little magic wand, all the furniture in the room, which immediately began to chatter. And each article only talked of itself. Over the chest of drawers hung a large picture in a gilt frame, representing a landscape with fine old trees, flowers in the grass, and a broad stream which flowed through the wood, past several castles, far out into the wild ocean. Ole-Luk-Oie touched the picture with his magic wand, and immediately the birds commenced singing. The branches of the trees rustled, and the clouds moved across the sky, casting their shadows on the landscape beneath them. Then Ole-Luk-Oie lifted little Hjalmar up to the frame and placed his feet in the picture, just on the high grass. And there he stood, with the sun shining down upon him through the branches of the trees. He ran to the water and seated himself in a little boat which lay there, and which was painted red and white. The sails glittered like silver, and 6 swans, each with a golden circlet round its neck, and a bright blue star on its forehead, drew the boat past the green wood, where the trees talked of robbers and witches, and the flowers of beautiful little elves and fairies, whose histories the butterflies had related to them. Brilliant fish, with scales like silver and gold, swam after the boat, sometimes making a spring and splashing the water round them, while birds, red and blue, small and great, flew after him in 2 long lines. The gnats danced round them, and the cockchafers cried, "Boo, boo." They all wanted to follow Hjalmar, and all had some story to tell him. It was a most pleasant sail. Sometimes the forests were thick and dark, sometimes like a beautiful garden, gay with sunshine and flowers. Then he passed great palaces of glass and of marble, and on the balconies stood princesses, whose faces were those of little girls whom Hjalmar knew well and had often played with. One of them held out her hand, in which was a heart made of sugar, more beautiful than any confectioner ever sold. As Hjalmar sailed by, he caught hold of one side of the sugar heart and held it fast, and the princess held fast also, so that it broke in 2 pieces. Hjalmar had one piece, and the princess the other, but Hjalmar's was the largest. At each castle stood little princes acting as sentinels. They presented arms and had golden swords, and made it rain plums and tin soldiers, so that they must have been real princes. Hjalmar continued to sail, sometimes through woods, sometimes as it were through large halls, and then by large cities. At last he came to the town where his nurse lived, who had carried him in her arms when he was a very little boy, and had always been kind to him. She nodded and beckoned to him, and then sang the little verses she had herself composed and set to him. How oft my memory turns to thee, my own Hjalmar, ever dear, when I could watch thy infant glee, or kiss away a pearly tear. 'Twas in my arms thy lisping tongue first spoke the half-remembered word, while o'er thy tottering steps I hung, my fond protection to afford. Farewell. I pray the heavenly power to keep thee till thy dying hour. And all the birds sang the same tune. The flowers danced on their stems, and the old trees nodded as if Ole-Luk-Oie had been telling them stories as well. Wednesday. How the rain did pour down. Hjalmar could hear it in his sleep, and when Ole-Luk-Oie opened the window, the water flowed quite up to the windowsill. It had the appearance of a large lake outside, and a beautiful ship lay close to the house. "Wilt thou sail with me tonight, little Hjalmar?" said Ole-Luk-Oie. "Then we shall see foreign countries, and thou shalt return here in the morning." All in a moment, there stood Hjalmar in his best clothes on the deck of the noble ship, and immediately the weather became fine. they sailed through the streets, round by the church, and on every side rolled the wide, great sea. They sailed till the land disappeared, and then they saw a flock of storks who had left their own country and were traveling to warmer climates. The storks flew one behind the other and had already been a long, long time on the wing. One of them seemed so tired that his wings could scarcely carry him. He was the last of the row, and was soon left very far behind. At length, he sunk lower and lower, with outstretched wings, flapping them in vain, till his feet touched the rigging of the ship, and he slided from the sails to the deck and stood before them. Then a sailor boy caught him and put him in the hen house with the fowls, the ducks, and the turkeys, while the poor stork stood quite bewildered amongst them. "Just look at that fellow," said the chickens. Then the turkey cock puffed himself out as large as he could and inquired who he was, and the ducks waddled backwards, crying, "Quack, quack." Then the stork told them all about warm Africa, of the pyramids, and of the ostrich, which, like a wild horse, runs across the desert. But the ducks did not understand what he said, and quacked amongst themselves, "We are all of the same opinion, namely, that he is stupid. Yes, to be sure, he is stupid," said the turkey cock, and gobbled. Then the stork remained quite silent, and thought of his home in Africa. "Those are handsome, thin legs of yours," said the turkey cock. "What do they cost a yard?" "Quack, quack, quack," grinned the ducks. But the stork pretended not to hear. "You may as well laugh," said the turkey, "for that remark was rather witty, or perhaps it was above you. Is he not clever? He will be a great amusement to us while he remains here." And then he gobbled, and the ducks quacked. Gobble, gobble, quack, quack. What a terrible uproar they made, while they were having such fun among themselves. Then Hjalmar went to the hen house, and, opening the door, called to the stork. Then he hopped out on the deck. He had rested himself now, and he looked happy, and seemed as if he nodded to Hjalmar, as if to thank him. Then he spread his wings and flew away to warmer countries, while the hens clucked, the ducks quacked, and the turkey cock turned quite scarlet in the head. "Tomorrow you shall be made into soup," said Hjalmar to the fowls. And then he awoke and found himself lying in his little bed. It was a wonderful journey which Ole-Luk-Oie had made him take this night. Thursday. "What do you think I have got here?" said Ole-Luk-Oie. "Do not be frightened, and you shall see a little mouse." And then he held out his hand to him, in which lay a lovely little creature. It has come to invite you to a wedding. 2 little mice are going to enter into the marriage state tonight. They reside under the floor of your mother's storeroom, and that must be a fine dwelling place. But how can I get through the little mouse hole in the floor? Asked Hjalmar. Leave me to manage that, said Ole-Luk-Oie. I will soon make you small enough. And then he touched Hjalmar with his magic wand, whereupon he became less and less, until at last he was not longer than a little finger. Now you can borrow the dress of the tin soldier. I think it will just fit you. It looks well to wear a uniform when you go into company. Yes, certainly, said Hjalmar, and in a moment he was dressed as neatly as the neatest of all tin soldiers. Will you be so good as to seat yourself in your mamma's thimble, said the little mouse, that I may have the pleasure of drawing you to the wedding. Will you really take so much trouble, young lady? Said Hjalmar. And so, in this way, he rode to the mouse's wedding. First, they went under the floor, and then passed through a long passage, which was scarcely high enough to allow the thimble to drive under. And the whole passage was lit up with the phosphorescent light of rotten wood. Does it not smell delicious? Asked the mouse as she drew him along. The wall and the floor have been smeared with bacon rind. Nothing can be nicer. Very soon they arrived at the bridal hall. On the right stood all the little lady mice, whispering and giggling as if they were making game of each other. To the left were the gentleman mice, stroking their whiskers with their forepaws. And in the center of the hall could be seen the bridal pair, standing side by side in a hollow cheese rind and kissing each other, while all eyes were upon them, for they had already been betrothed and were soon to be married. More and more friends kept arriving, till the mice were nearly treading each other to death, for the bridal pair now stood in the doorway, and none could pass in or out. The room had been rubbed over with bacon rind, like the passage, which was all the refreshment offered to the guests. But for dessert, they produced a pea, on which a mouse belonging to the bridal pair had bitten the first letters of their names. This was something quite uncommon. All the mice said it was a very beautiful wedding, and that they had been very agreeably entertained. After this, Hjalmar returned home. He had certainly been in grand society, but he had been obliged to creep under a room and to make himself small enough to wear the uniform of a tin soldier. Friday. It is incredible how many old people there are who would be glad to have me at night, said Ole-Luk-Oie, especially those who have done something wrong. Good little Ole, say they to me, we cannot close our eyes, and we lie awake the whole night, and see all our evil deeds sitting on our beds like little imps and sprinkling us with hot water? Will you come and drive them away, that we may have a good night's rest? And then they sigh so deeply and say, we would gladly pay you for it. Good night, Ole-Luk. The money lies on the window, but I never do anything for gold. What shall we do tonight? Asked Hjalmar. I do not know whether you would care to go to another wedding, he replied, although it is quite a different affair to the one we saw last night. Your sister's large doll, that is dressed like a man and is called Herman, intends to marry the doll Bertha. It is also the doll's birthday, and they will receive many presents. Yes, I know that already, said Hjalmar. My sister always allows her dolls to keep their birthdays or to have a wedding when they require new clothes. That has happened already 100 times, I am quite sure. Yes, so it may. But tonight is the 101st wedding, and when that has taken place, it must be the last. Therefore this is to be extremely beautiful. Only look. Hjalmar looked at the table, and there stood the little cardboard doll's house, with lights in all the windows, and drawn up before it were the tin soldiers presenting arms. The bridal pair were seated on the floor, leaning against the leg of the table, looking very thoughtful, and with good reason. Then Ole-Luk-Oie, dressed up in grandmother's black gown, married them. As soon as the ceremony was concluded, all the furniture in the room joined in singing a beautiful song, which had been composed by the lead pencil, and which went to the melody of a military tattoo. What merry sounds are on the wind, as marriage rites together bind a quiet and a loving pair, though formed of kid, yet smooth and fair. Hurrah! If they are deaf and blind, we'll sing, though weather prove unkind. And now came the present, but the bridal pair had nothing to eat, for love was to be their food. Shall we go to a country house or travel? Asked the bridegroom. Then they consulted the swallow who had traveled so far, and the old hen in the yard, who had brought up 5 broods of chickens. And the swallow talked to them of warm countries, where the grapes hang in large clusters on the vines, and the air is soft and mild, and about the mountains glowing with colors more beautiful than we can think of. But they have no red cabbage like we have, said the hen. I was once in the country with my chickens for a whole summer. There was a large sand pit in which we could walk about and scratch as we liked. Then we got into a garden in which grew red cabbage. Oh, how nice it was. I cannot think of anything more delicious. But one cabbage stalk is exactly like another, said the swallow. And here we have often bad weather. Yes, but we are accustomed to it, said the hen. But it is so cold here, and freezes sometimes. Cold weather is good for cabbages, said the hen. Besides, we do have it warm here sometimes. 4 years ago, we had a summer that lasted more than 5 weeks, and it was so hot one could scarcely breathe. And then, in this country, we have no poisonous animals, and we are free from robbers. He must be wicked who does not consider our country the finest of all lands. He ought not to be allowed to live here. And then the hen wept very much and said, I have also traveled. I once went 12 miles in a coop, and it was not pleasant traveling at all. The hen is a sensible woman, said the doll Bertha. I don't care for traveling over mountains, just to go up and come down again. No, let us go to the sand pit in front of the gate, and then take a walk in the cabbage garden. And so they settled it. Saturday. Am I to hear any more stories? Asked little Hjalmar, as soon as Ole-Luk-Oie had sent him to sleep. We shall have no time this evening, said he, spreading out his prettiest umbrella over the child. Look at these Chinese. And then the whole umbrella appeared like a large china bowl with blue trees and pointed bridges upon which stood little Chinamen nodding their heads. We must make all the world beautiful for tomorrow morning, said Ole-Luk-Oie, for it will be a holiday. It is Sunday. I must now go to the church steeple and see if the little sprites who live there have polished the bells so that they may sound sweetly. Then I must go into the fields and see if the wind has blown the dust from the grass and the leaves. And the most difficult task of all which I have to do is to take down all the stars and brighten them up. I have to number them first before I put them in my apron, and also to number the places from which I take them, so that they may go back into the right holes, or else they would not remain, and we should have a number of falling stars, for they would all tumble down, one after the other. Hark ya, Mr. Luke-Oie, said an old portrait which hung on the wall of Hjalmar's bedroom. Do you know me? I am Hjalmar's great-grandfather. I thank you for telling the boy stories, but you must not confuse his ideas. The stars cannot be taken down from the sky and polished. They are spheres like our Earth, which is a good thing for them. Just so. Thank you, old great-grandfather, said Ole-Luk-Oie. I thank you. You may be the head of the family, as no doubt you are, but I am older than you. I am an ancient heathen. The old Romans and Greeks named me the dream god. I have visited the noblest houses and continue to do so. Still, I know how to conduct myself both to high and low, and now you may tell the stories yourself." And so Ole-Luk-Oie walked off, taking his umbrellas with him. "Well, well, one is never to give an opinion, I suppose," grumbled the portrait. And it woke Hjalmar. Sunday. "Good evening," said Ole-Luk-Oie. Hjalmar nodded, and then sprang out of bed and turned his great-grandfather's portrait to the wall so that it might not interrupt them as it had done yesterday. "Now," said he, "you must tell me some stories about 5 green peas that lived in one pod, or of the chick seed that courted the chickweed, or of the darning needle who acted so proudly because she fancied herself an embroidery needle. You may have too much of a good thing," said Ole-Luk-Oie. "You know that I like best to show you something, so I will show you my brother. He is also called Ole-Luk-Oie, but he never visits anyone but once. And when he does come, he takes him away on his horse and tells him stories as they ride along. He knows only 2 stories. One of these is so wonderfully beautiful that no one in the world can imagine anything at all like it. But the other is just as ugly and frightful, so that it would be impossible to describe it." Then Ole-Luk-Oie lifted Hjalmar up to the window. "There now, you can see my brother, the other Ole-Luk-Oie. He is also called Death. You perceive he is not so bad as they represent him in picture books. There he is a skeleton, but now his coat is embroidered with silver, and he wears the splendid uniform of a hussar, and a mantle of black velvet flies behind him over the horse. Look how he gallops along." Hjalmar saw that as this Ole-Luk-Oie rode on, he lifted up old and young and carried them away on his horse. Some he seated in front of him and some behind, but always inquired first, "How stands the mark book?" "Good," they all answered. "Yes, but let me see for myself," he replied. And they were obliged to give him the books. Then all those who had very good or exceedingly good came in front of the horse and heard the beautiful story, while those who had middling or tolerably good in their books were obliged to sit behind and listen to the frightful tale. They trembled and cried and wanted to jump down from the horse, but they could not get free, for they seemed fastened to the seat. "Why, Death is a most splendid Luk-Oie," said Hjalmar. "I am not in the least afraid of him." "You need have no fear of him," said Ole-Luk-Oie, "if you take care and keep a good conduct book." "Now I call that very instructive," murmured the great-grandfather's portrait. "It is useful sometimes to express an opinion, so he was quite satisfied. These are some of the doings and sayings of Ole-Luk-Oie. I hope he may visit you himself this evening and relate some more.